Can they do that?
Facebook will. Facebook
What?
will. If you're 5 minutes late, Facebook can end your connection to the Facebook stream. So
That's so meta.
Wow.
that is so meta. And hello,
rude.
everyone. That's so meta. Yeah, that's the spin-off movie from show from That's So Raven. But no, it's not, but it could be nowadays. But thank you so much, folks, for stepping into the spoiler room, coming down the stairs and popping. Oh, liking it. Oh, almost. There it is.
I'm on my fifth double espresso of the day.
Long day. Yep.
Water.
Favorite drink.
Me too.
God's soda.
I'm getting my white girl on with my pumpkin spice cider boys here, but
God,
we
that
need it
sounds-
tonight. We're drinking alcohol in dry month. Don't tell the cops or the Untouchables. Which is what we're talking about tonight. Yes, we are talking about the De Palma film of the Untouchables, not the TV show. I really loved the TV show, but we are talking about the Untouchables from Brian De Palma, and I have a great group of Untouchables here tonight to talk about this interesting window into biopic of sorts, I guess.
First way, it's bullshit. A lot of it's bullshit.
How about a sort of spin on Western mythology?
Oh, well, yeah. and his
Like
wonderful voice is back with us from the establishing shot. It is none other than Mr. Jeff York. Hello, Jeff. How are you?
Great. Good to see you all. Happy to be here with such wonderful brethren.
He's here
We
tonight.
kind of are our own floor of Untouchables, I dare say.
We are our own floor of Untouchables.
You made it to the end of the night, Mark, with your life.
Yes.
That's their end of the lesson.
End of selection. Okay, so you're going to be Sean Connery.
Well, I'm the only one that can do them.
Or
Or maybe Joe was trying to do them, but I'm not sure.
I wasn't yet. You go Giuseppe Petri.
there you go.
Which
I knew it.
Giuseppe's
That
not
good, no
good.
darn good
No.
Stephen Wop.
Well, we got to watch that on the live
Hey,
stream.
wait it now.
I'm
Now you're going to
quoting.
get me canceled
I'm
here or
quoting.
something, Jeff.
I was quoting. Hello,
I know you were
censors.
quoting. I know you were quoting the movie. Absolutely. Yes. From the Literary License Podcast and many other things, Mr. Joe Randazzo has joined us again. Hello, Joe.
Everyone.
Hey, Joe.
And okay, so you're Giuseppe.
I mean, it is my given name.
Yeah.
wow.
Well, there you go. There you go. And then we have none other than the man who keeps coming back for more, our Elliot Ness, Mr. Ian Simmons. Or do you want to be the accountant?
Yeah, I'll be Charles Martin Smith and die in the elevator really early in the picture, so I don't have to watch the
Oh,
rest
great. So that
Oh
makes-
no!
Oh,
Not
crap.
that early, though. I mean,
Oh
shit,
no!
That makes
Wow!
me Elliot Ness then, I guess.
Oh,
Crap.
wow!
Crap. I knew that was coming. Lovely. Now I'm Elliot Ness. That's wonderful.
I just hope I'm
I'm-
not the cheese standing alone amongst you three.
I'm Kevin Costner from Chicago. Anyway,
Oh, man. Did he sound like that?
That was his best delivery in the entire movie.
Yes. He sounds like a dork the rest of the movie. Every line delivery, he just sounds like a total dork.
well, tonight we're going to
it's
give
going to be
our
a
good-
long hour.
we will give our good friend Mr. Jeff York the privilege or the choice. You get first shot if you would like, or you can pass to give the synopsis of the Untouchables.
Well, I'll be happy to, since I'm the only one who'll do it with, I think, a modicum of enthusiasm. Al Capone is ruling Chicago with an iron fist. The virtual mayor, all roads sort of lead to him and lead out from him as he's running the rackets and prostitution and speakeasies during, the anti-drinking craze that went on during that time. And the FBI sends a Fed named Elliot Ness, a squeaky clean sort of Boy Scout, to see what he can do to maybe clean up some of that mess. I'm not sure if they ever really explained that well enough. Like, why would they send an unseasoned guy out there? He's a sitting duck. But he goes out there and realizes quickly that he's not going to be able to achieve much of anything because most of the cops in Chicago are on the take, and they all are sort of beholden to Capone and his many, many businesses that make money for everyone. And he decides the only way he can do it is to sort of get his own group of people together who he hopes will remain untouchable, to sort of, take the fight to Capone and his people. And, when one of his pulls a knife, they will pull a gun. And it's sort of, I dare say, and I was going to say this for later, but I realize now I have to sort of get this out there, otherwise it will be completely lost. And that is, it is sort of a spin on a Western sort of, with not only the good guys in the white hats versus the bad guy, though the real bad guy here wears white hat. Irony, but it's not really the true story in any sense of the word, and purposely so. David Mamet has talked about that. It's kind of a mythos, kind of recreation of it, and. It plays as a Western. Ennio Morricone's score has a harmonica in it. There's a scene where they're on horseback at the Canadian border that is literally the idea of the four, good guys on horses coming to save the day. And yet I liked all of it, most of it, a lot of the entertainment and the hubris and the chutzpah and the fun of it, despite those definitely legit criticisms, because I think De Palma has such a sense of showmanship, and there's a lot of comedy and some real pathos and everything else over the top, sort of emotions on your sleeve kind of stuff. So anyway, that's the crux of the elevator pitch, though it was a very long elevator pitch, probably like a Die Hard building level elevator pitch to the top floor. Who's that guy running around barefoot? What's he doing up there? It's cold, it's windy.
And he was,
but anyway, it was a big hit in 1987, and it won Sean Connery an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. And unfortunately, Ennio Morricone went home empty-handed once again. But it was one of the big hits, and I think has built in some respects its sort of cult status, if not its critical status. I think probably its critical status has diminished some, as you three will probably attest.
Well, yeah, I still love the movie. I mean, it's pulpy. It's not exactly, I mean, if you're gonna level out like the great like crime epics, this isn't gonna go anywhere near like The Godfather. But it's,
of course not.
But I find it entertaining in its own right. And Ennio Morricone, we'll talk about it next week with Once Upon a Time in America, got robbed again, because this is a great score too.
It's a great score. And it actually had three themes.
It was what?
It's also there's three themes in this, which you just don't hear in movie scores anymore, as we've often talked about.
Yeah.
But, Morricone really went out and above and beyond on this one too.
Yeah, because you have the title score. You have Ness at Home, and what was the third one?
Like a rousing action.
Yes, the rousing one that ends at.
Well, I was thinking about specifically the one at the border. When they
that's the first time it's that when they're crossing the street to break into the secret
post office.
That's the first time you hear it. Then you hear it in the Canadian Mountie scene, and then you hear it at the very end after Prohibition is ended.
So Joe, you enjoy this film even with its warts?
Yeah, I mean it's still a fun movie, and Connery steals it though. Connery steals it right from Costner, just takes it right from him and runs with it. Sorry. Yeah, every time. I mean, even as a kid watching it, I always thought that Kevin Costner's portrayal of Elliot Ness was very dorky, like the bad one-liners and the delivery is often pretty bad by Costner, I feel. Andy Garcia also, I don't know if he was attempting an Italian accent and it just became whatever the hell it is he's doing, but
well, wisely they didn't give him too many lines. In fact, he did most of his action. I mean, he really, I think, comes on strong at the very end of course, the famous scene in the Union train station. But he was better not having to say much, because he was kind of a, the strong silent type, if you will, but also the accent was a little dodgy.
Yeah.
What about you, Ian? Your initial feeling with The Untouchables?
Well, it's hard to say, because as I mentioned a bit ago, I used to like this movie, and I don't know if it's because I hadn't watched it in so long that I have developed more of a critical cap that I put on stuff, but also I think part of it is talking about gangster pictures, classic gangster pictures with you on this show. We've talked about a number of them. And so to see this, I was thinking like The Little Giant that we talked about last week is 10 times the movie this is, and says a lot more about the time period, the character, the people who are involved. I mean, this movie, to say it's a cartoon is an understatement. I mean, I was thinking about this. First, I hated Connery in this movie. Now, a lot of it, I think, just comes down to the screenplay. Don't make him an Irish cop. Make him a Scottish beat cop, because he's in a scene. He gets into an alley fight with an actor who's doing a bona fide, good, worked hard on it Scottish or Irish accent. They're supposed to be Irish boys from back in the day, and yet I'm like, what are you doing running around with those Untouchables? And you're like, I told you. I'm like, no, you're not trying. It's the same thing Costner did in freaking Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. Where he's walking around talking like Kevin Costner, and he's supposed to be Old English. I'm like, no. On top of that, De Niro is just doing his thing, and as far as a character, you could remove Al Capone from this movie and it would be the exact same film. He is not connected to it at all, except for one run-in scene with Costner. I maintain that if you had kept that one scene where Capone is coming down the stairs and he runs into Elliot Ness, as sort of like he's finally confronting this unseen figure, he's just kind of like this invisible. He's untouchable in his own way. Just one scene with Capone, I think that would have been better, because the baseball bat scene, I still don't understand. Maybe I missed the connection with the guy who's brainsy beat in. I mean, I guess he's
the guy who was running the operation at the post office, and because it got undone, he blamed him.
Right, but the thing is, all these, no offense to anybody, all these fucking people look exactly the same. So I'm like, I can't tell one greasy guy in a tux from another.
I knew it.
Well, and on top of that, like he's talking about, it's a team effort, and we only win if the team wins. Right. And he beats the guy's brains in. The guy didn't turn on him; he got busted by high level detective work. So that didn't make any sense. Like, what kind? It's like you got to make an example out of the guy, but what example are you setting? I don't know. I did not. This is a Brian De Palma film, right? And it feels like almost like a Toby Hooper, Steven Spielberg kind of situation. That whole legend, like, we're going to give you a known horror director this spooky movie, and yet we're going to turn it into like this candy coated, Hollywood adventure thing. I felt this was more Spielberg than De Palma. I didn't really see De Palma in this movie that much. I found it obnoxious. And I was like, I want to watch a real movie about these characters. And on top of that, Costner is awful. But I found, in talking with a friend of mine yesterday about this movie and why I didn't respond to it for the first time in 35 years, whatever. There's a better version of this character who showed up in a movie 10 years later. And that's Guy Pearce in LA Confidential, playing pretty much the exact same character. You put that character in this movie, instantly 5 times better.
Yeah, that's a great movie, and I think that does stand up as one of the great kind of cop movies and period pieces as well, and one of my favorite movies, actually, now that you mention it. I do think you raise a number of interesting thoughts, if you don't mind me just saying for a second, Mark. And
go ahead.
Because as much as I like it, I'm with Joe. It's very entertaining, and I think for me, it's probably grown out of any sort of real, maybe proportion, in the sense that because I saw when I was younger, and it was a big event, and it was Chicago and 100 other things at the time. And I've sort of got past some of the really, really glaring faults of it. But the curiosity of it for me is like, why did David Mamet write this like this? Because to your point about the screenplay, Ian, if he had done it as straighter, more legit, I mean, even the terrible choice of making Frank Nitti this satanic hitman, when that was not who Nitti was at all, and ran the whole operation, and was like the Stanley Tucci character in Road to Perdition. He was this glorified accountant guy who was really kind of like a cold, hard guy, but he was cut from the cloth of the guys back out east who were, at the end of the day, real businessmen. I don't know why he made so many ridiculous, and I think that's a good word for it, sort of big over the top nutty choices like that. And then there's one on top of another after this, when you could see if there was a rewrite, almost like, I mean, you can't rewrite Mammon. I'm sure at that time he was coming off the Pulitzer for Glengarry Glen Ross. Nobody's going to touch him. And he also did The Verdict a couple years earlier, which was a great script. But for some reason, he decided to do this one as a Western, and a kind of lampooning almost Western, which I think you sit there and you shake your head and go like, wow, if it had been rewritten by a serious writer and taken some of his great ideas, but put it through the serious typewriter, I think you might have had a classic that was also critically revered today.
Yeah, well,
Mark, I don't want to offend you, so you might want to cover your ears while I share this with the rest of the panel. And it just occurred to me as Jeff was talking, this movie should have been called Zack Snyder's The Untouchables.
There's too much color. There's too much color. Come on. Anyway,
not enough slow motion.
There's not enough slow motion either.
Oh, come on. That train, the Union Station scene at the end. Yeah. Look, I grew up with a completely different recollection of how that scene played out. But in the end, when I'm watching it this time, a couple of nights ago, I'm checking my watch. There's slow motion, and then there's let's get the hell on with this. Sorry.
Actually, speaking of age, we've got a look. We're just going to pull over real quick because we've got a live viewer who commented and said, Richard Yu said, I remember when this came out when I was 10 years old. I was 12 when it came out. So
it was 87, so I would have been 6.
Well, thanks a lot, everybody. Let's keep talking about age.
All right. Well, there's one thing though that Jeff mentioned, that the Frank Nitti thing is kind of interesting, because Frank Nitti, not only did he not die that way, he committed suicide when he was about to go potentially to prison, and he actually took over Capone's mob while he was in prison. So the idea that Nitti dies and then Capone goes to prison is completely out there from any kind of reality.
In all things, Road to Perdition, a comic book adaptation, is played. The character is played by Stanley Tucci, and that's more historically accurate than anything with him in it in this one.
Here's the Nero baseball bat scene, I think, was based on, and again, nothing like what happened here. I think it was based on an urban legend that Capone, learned somebody in his gang. Yep. Was one of the capos was gonna take his portion of the gang out of the gang, and he beat him in front of people, beat him to death to make an example of him. But that's, like Ian said, that's not what happens here. This poor guy just got busted. He didn't turn on him. He didn't rat him out or anything. I mean, we don't know. In the movie, in the case of the movie, we don't know. He is out, so who knows? Maybe he did turn on him in some way. But yeah, he just beats him with a bat in front of everybody. So yeah, there's nuggets of like what really happened in here, and then there's just like total fabrications. But yeah, this is definitely not a historical piece. It's like I said, it's like 80% fake. The whole thing on the Canadian border never happened at all. Yeah. It happened in David Mamet's brain.
What were you going to say, Ian?
I don't know, but I want to go back to one thing involving Connery, and this is not his fault, but I don't know if it's a high definition thing, or maybe people noticed it in the theaters and they just never said it. But the bit where he gets taken out, it's a nice scene where he's walking in his apartment. The hood is kind of trailing him. He gets in there and he draws him out onto the back porch where Nitty's waiting there with the machine gun. Two problems. One, it's established that Connery lives, Malone, his character, he doesn't live on the ground floor of this apartment. There's like there's a bit of a height and a ledge that this guy is on. Mm-hmm. And yet the point of view of the camera is sweeping along this, peering in through all the windows as if the assassin, or the decoy rather, is on the camera crane as it's going by. And yet we're supposed to be like, do like this guy, no way he'd be able to move that quickly.
I think Brian Palmer saw Tenebrae.
I think he saw Halloween, because there was another thing that Tom Savini pointed this out, and I've never been able to shake it ever since. Like little 5-year-old Michael Myers all of a sudden becomes the height of adult Michael Myers when he's stalking his sister. But anyway, that's beside the point. When Connery goes out onto those steps and Nitti mows him down, the great Billy Drago, You can see the backpack or whatever the squibs are on,
the squibs,
he gains like 85 pounds, and then you see him in the next scene where he's just crawling through his apartment, like, oh, where did all that bulk go? It's so messy.
I didn't notice that.
It's a good point, actually. Can I just riff on that for just a second? Because that's what it confounds me is, generally speaking, De Palma gets trashed for, his sexual proclivities, the violence, a lot of times having sort of an immature screenplay that doesn't quite match a lot of the maturity of his gliding camera and clever editing and Peter Donaggio scores and some of those kind of things. But this, being a Brian De Palma work for hire, he doesn't even do the direction all that well here. In fact, in some respects, he makes dumb mistakes like that. I also think, like, how many times do you have to shoot Sean Connery in the chest? I mean, one would have done it, but he takes like 100 bullets and then he's still crawling until he dies. And it's like, there's no reason to do that. To your point about the train station scene, I remember when I first was watching, it's like, where are these sailors coming from? There's one expositional shot that shows these sailors running up to try to help or stop. It's like suddenly this barren staircase suddenly has 6 or 7 people that are just sitting ducks waiting to be shot. It's like, where do they
get up just so they get shot?
Starting. Why aren't they like just laying on the ground and staying out of it? But no, you not only get a sailor getting shot, but he's still carrying his duffel bag. It's like, Brian, are you thinking? That doesn't even make logical sense. Even if the guy was trying to help, I think he put down his goddamn duffel bag.
There's on top of that, let's talk about the baby carriage that is like just on an angle going down those steps. At no point does it flip over.
Yeah.
I go to Union Station twice a week when I'm downtown for lunch, and there is no way you're going to get a baby carriage going down those steps.
Now, Richard Hughes watching also points out the train station scene got its inspiration from the battleship Potemkin, which was like totally, completely, homage, whatever you want to say, but it was done better.
Do you know why that was done? It's actually a very good story. And you can look it up. I mean, I'm not making this up. Though I do have some stories that I can tell you about a couple of the actors in this film that I talked to them about making it, and I'll share that later. But originally they cast, they wanted De Niro to play Capone, but he was busy doing another movie. So they went with second choice, and that was Bob Hoskins. And Hoskins was sitting around the hotel for weeks waiting to start. And suddenly De Niro's, whatever, I think the film got postponed or whatever, so it became available. And De Palma, being De Palma, said, I got to have Bobby. I've worked with him before a couple times. He's the guy, blah, 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 blah. And the studio said, okay, we want to give you what you want because you're Brian De Palma. So they gave the walking papers to Hoskins, but they had to pay him.
Yeah.
And he got like $250,000 for doing nothing. So then when it came time for this big scene where they're going to be chasing down the train as it goes down the tracks and stopping it and having the shootout within this moving train, the studio said, that was your $250,000, pal. We can't rent you that train anymore. So all that's gone. And De Palma, basically finding that out in a couple of days, had to improvise, and he came up with the train station sequence, which ends up being the one that most people remember and talk about from the film. But, even that's sloppy. It's like, why is he not just going with Bob Hoskins, a great actor who would have been fine? Instead, they got to delay some of the shooting because De Niro has to go and gain weight because he's a method actor and he wants to be filled with pasta. And it just that kind of, there's a little bit of like, almost sort of this ridiculous entitlement and or excess that, maybe was part of the time in Hollywood, but it shows up here but it makes for sloppy filmmaking.
Yeah.
The scene still, I still love the scene, even sloppy as it may be. And everybody popping up just to get shot is kind of sloppy, but also kind of funny. It's just it's like a carnival game. It's like they pop up, you shoot them down,
whack-a-mole.
That's literally what I said to my roommate. Like it's like whack-a-mole. They pop up just so we can shoot them.
So, and the funny thing about it is, it's saved, I think, in some respects, even though a lot of it is laughable, by Andy Garcia, who suddenly comes in at the last minute, is watching the killer, tosses Elliot Ness the extra gun because he's out, catches the baby crib, and then from this terrible angle that is going to give him sciatica or whatever, some sort of back problems the next day, is still able to take out the driver who's going to take the book bookkeeper out, and he gets him when he's about to go 2, and he gets him right in that little hole, because that's how good a marksman he is. But it's a great ending to a scene that, despite its memorability and a lot of fun of it, and sort of the idea of it, gee, what is he? Father saving the kid, or the Fed getting his man? He gets to do both. The faults of it, it's saved by a really clever little ending, and it's mostly Garcia.
I was going to say it's kind of a passing of the torch, because even at the end, he hands him the lockbox key, and says, "You're the real cop."
That's right.
It is kind of a passing of the torch moment in a way. Yeah. But there's one thing about Garcia. What's that?
Kind of a baptism of fire in a way, where he comes out getting that Ed Exley Medal of Honor from.
In a way, he would have wanted a real cop to have it.
Make you head of detectives.
But the other thing is, there's no way in hell, from where Andy Garcia starts, does he ever in a million years, you could try this a million times, and the odds are he would maybe 0 times manage to get down from there to the end of the staircase to catch the carriage. The way that carriage is moving, there's no way Garcia's getting down there.
Well,
it's the magic of movies.
What you have here,
he's running. The carriage is going in slow motion. He's running in real time.
What you have here is a rated R Dick Tracy, is what you have here. Okay,
you were saving that one, weren't you, Mark?
I was saving that one. I was waiting. I was letting you guys talk.
I'm Charlton Heston, changing the balance of power in that one scene from the Ten Commandments, where Yul Brynner is going on about, like, is it true that you gave the slain? Yes.
I wanted to finally throw in my hat in the ring here. You guys,
I love too. Dick Tracy's outlandish too, and I love it for it.
Yeah, well, great conversation. But then for me, watching it this time, I'm like, oh my god, this is a rated R Dick Tracy, because everything's outlandish. This is them trying to take a real events pick and make it a popcorn film, is what they're doing here. If you look at it, all the caricatures and everything, they're not going, as we've all pointed out tonight, historical accuracy is thrown out the window in here for the sake of entertainment. They're using these characters in these situations, with the banter and that. And if you look at it, it's like, no, they're trying to make this a popcorn film rather than a serious film. I mean, if you watch the original TV series, that was more serious than this film by quite a bit. And I thoroughly enjoyed the TV series. It was on syndication. My dad and my grandpa watched it a lot. And so I watched a lot of episodes of Elliot Ness and that, and the Untouchables. And that was exaggerated too. But this entire film, I mean, it's just watching it, I'm just like, and Costner's great depending on the role. I think this film was too big for Costner, in all honesty. Sean Connery handled it. I know you didn't care for him, Ian. I think Sean Connery, at least out of everybody here, feels like an actual character.
He does in the first scene where he meets Costner on the bridge.
Yes. Yeah,
that's fine. But the rest of it, and here's the thing, I can't put any of this really at Costner's feet. I think a lot of these problems go back to the direction, the screenplay, and the studio mandate for what this movie was going to be. But that whole thing of like that's the Chicago way, and here ended the lesson. It's catchphrasy, it's cute, it's Mamet giving into I think his worst impulses. Well, yeah.
I mean, that's such a Schwarzenegger line,
Yeah,
right.
Remember how I said I was going to kill you last, Sally? Yeah, that's right. That's what you said. I lied. Now get in the car along with Frank Nitti.
But they attempt those lines with Costner several times.
Yes.
And that's the last scene is or at least the last scene with Nitti is the only time either of them ever work. Yeah. Because the rest of the time they just come off dorky to the point where let's do some good. Maybe it was intentional because the cops in the very next scene are making fun of it.
Or his
then he gets in and says, let's do some good.
And he gets the line, when Bob Swan is the Mountie, he says, like, we do not approve of your methods. Oh, yeah? Well, you must not be from Chicago. You almost expect Charles Martin to get out the drum and hit the rim shot.
that line should have been Connery's line.
Yeah,
it should have been.
Yeah.
Now, okay, here's the thing. What bothers me, I think, the most about this movie is you look at the pedigree.
Mhm.
Okay, Giorgio Armani doing the costumes, Ennio Morricone doing the score, De Palma directing, De Niro, Costner. These are all people that come from like serious film backgrounds, and you think of these things like, oh, this is going to be a serious movie, exaggerated historically or not. It's going to be like this balls to the wall, like dark, bloody crime drama, and it's not. I mean, that whole bit with the Canadian Mountie raid, and you've got, Charles Martin Smith, literally, he's the short guy with the big hat and the giant glasses and the pipe hanging out of his mouth. He's a cartoon character from I almost said Will Smith, Will Eisner's Spirit Comics. And
or
the
Dick
whole
Tracy.
thing where he's going, right. And he's like, the whole thing where he's running with the shotgun after the guys and like, becoming a badass. Never mind the fact that he was literally like standing there for a minute trying to get up the courage to do what he had to do. He would have been, ground beef, considering there were like 3 guys with machine guns in that truck that he was about to attack. Like, I get it. There's an excuse for a rousing score and the juxtaposition of like, oh, look, the nerdy accountant guy is going to become a gun wielding badass. But in terms of drama, it just doesn't work.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it has a lot of the pieces there. You just wish they would have taken a different direction, and it pretty much does boil down to the script and their approach with the screenplay. And pardon my mentioning it, but I apologize to all. But I interviewed Mitzi Perrone last week about her film St. Clair, and one of the main points she made was, because I said the whole cast did really well, and she goes, well, for her philosophy, her approach, and what she's learned is, to have a good movie, you really need a solid screenplay, because no matter what talent you have, and I'm sure we've all seen it, no matter what talent you have, if you don't have a decent screenplay or a solid story, it doesn't matter. They're going to come off awful. No matter how much they try to save it, their talent, if the story isn't there or the screenplay and the dialogue isn't there, it's not going to work right. And that, for me, just for me, it didn't work with the Untouchables, because it has the look, it has the pedigree, it has everything that, as Ian said, you're looking at this going, oh, this is going to be some nice, heavy, meaty, prohibition battle ness, and it's almost like the violence that we get, which is De Palma, but the violence almost seems out of character for the rest of the film. When you get the graphic, bloody violence, you almost forget for a moment that that's what this type of film is supposed to be going for, because everything else is so exaggerated and cartoony and made kind of more for your masses and entertainment, that when you get to the brutal, like the bat scene, and when Connery's character gets shot up, or we even see the accountant get it, it's like suddenly it felt like out of character. You're like, whoa.
I think this is one of those examples too, where you have to have a director in some films where he knows the cast that he's working with, or knows how to direct the cast that he's working with. And I'll tell you this, I talked to 2 actors who were in the movie. One was Bob Swan, who played the Mountie captain. And I asked him, I said, what was De Palma like to work with? And he never talked to the actors. And I said, well, who did? He goes, Connery and Costner. Because they would ask him, like, what's your take on this scene? De Palma never came and said, here's the scene. He was very obsessed and very concerned about 100 other things that he had to deal with, which were, the sort of epicness of it, and the violence and some of those kind of things. In a lot of places, I mean, he had never done period pieces before, and suddenly this is a big period piece, and you've got to have the cars right and the set right, and am I getting LaSalle Avenue right, and 100 other things. And it was a big movie compared to most of the things he'd done. I mean, even when he did The Fury and Dressed to Kill and those kind of movies, they were very small, tight productions. They had a couple of big stars, and smartly he cast actors who knew what they were doing. Here, he's got actors who generally know what they're doing, but I think he was letting them sort of be directed to this Western mythos feeling, where it's all kind of big. And, well, we're doing these fantastical scenes. There's going to be this and that, and Connery's going to have this amazing death, the most amazing death. He's, just shot with 100 bullets, and it's like what? But I keep when I returned to this a few years ago, I was on television. I watched it, and again, like I said, I've lost some perspective on it. I can still watch it. I mostly laugh at it now because to me it's funny. But I kept thinking, Richard Donner had a similar kind of issue when he did The Omen.
Mm-hmm.
And it's big. There's ridiculous deaths in it. It's, kind of could have been really hokey. But if anything, every last role in that, other than maybe the priest when he's getting a little bit crazy in front of the, the Gregory Peck character, is underplaying. I mean, David Warner is always sort of in this thing like, do you notice anything about this picture? Interesting coincidence, don't you think? I mean, he almost throws it away. Even his final shot where he looks up like, is that really going to, there's The Omen. But because everything else is kind of big in it, the violence, some of the out of nowhere villains, even Billy Whitelaw, who played Mrs. Baylock in it, she's pretty serene during most of it. I mean, she goes crazy in that last scene where she's fighting with Gregory Peck, but that's in the shadows, sort of like Joe is now. And we don't see much of her crazy seething face because most of it, she's like, the dog will be removed, sir. It's just kind of matter of fact. Here, everybody is directed big, big, big. And I don't know if that's Costner or Connor saying, well, shit, they're going to shoot me 100 times and I'm still going to be able to gurgle out, no, what's you? We're prepared to do apparently anything to get that Oscar over Albert Brooks. I can't believe they didn't give me the Oscar after all that sweat. Mine was supposed to be a comedy.
That's a strange thing about that scene. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, but it's funny to me that the actors are a little bit out of control and big here, but I think De Palma was making everything else cinematic and big and Brian De Palma-esque and stuff. And then the actors just kind of followed suit and it's too much. Everything is big. And to your very point about when that violence comes in, oh my God, they've killed Charles Martin Smith in the elevator. And, the mournful, no, 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 no theme comes up from Morricone. It's like, does the film earn that? Does it deserve those scenes and that much pathos? Not compared to, we're kind of laughing at the guy getting clobbered with the bat and boom, boom, boom. And it just spreads out. It's like, I don't know. Am I laughing or crying at this? Or
it's strange because I've often heard people compare Brian De Palma to Dario Argento with, Dress to Kill and those movies. And it's funny that when you mention that he didn't really talk to the actors, he was more concerned with other things. It's always the thing that I've heard about Argento is he's not concerned with talking to the actors. He's concerned with where's my camera going to move. And that it makes sense now to hear that. And on Connery's death scene or Malone's death scene, the passage of time is interesting.
Yeah.
He gets shot like 100 times. And I don't know how much time goes in between him getting shot and crawling through the house to where Stone and Ness show up, and he's still alive somehow.
And he's holding the train schedule.
Well, he's pointing to the train schedule.
He's like,
I'm foregoing the beads because I'm going to meet my maker, and I want one last benediction and prayer.
No, he doesn't want the beads.
No, he's got the train schedule.
On top of that, when they go into the apartment, there is so much blood all over that floor that it's like Tina's death scene in Nightmare on Elm Street. It's like that's more blood than is in 3 Human Bodies. But
Carrie was just here.
That's right. Oh my God, I have an answer for that. How did he survive so long, guys? St. Jude, the patron saint of police.
The bullets missed all his major organs. That's what it was. He got shot a lot, but it all dodged most of the organs, so it took him a lot longer.
No, Nitty didn't clean his gun, so he couldn't put it away.
The bullets.
Have you cleaned your gun? Now put it away.
There's one
let me overact with a piece of sausage. Nitty, again, Albert Brooks. I didn't win.
Nitty, though. I never noticed it until today, and it's been, Nitty is everywhere, all over this movie, in the shadows, like often places where before he says a word. Like I never noticed. You see him like just walking down a street. You'll see him like everywhere. And I never noticed it until today. And it's weird because he's just wearing this white suit the whole time. So how the hell do you miss him? But I never noticed until today. He's in almost every scene in this movie where something terrible is about to happen or does happen.
Yeah.
I never realized until today. Maybe it's because today I watched it on Blu-ray versus watching it in lower definition quality my entire life, that I didn't realize he was the one that switches the suitcase bomb at the beginning of the movie either.
Oh yeah.
I never noticed that until today.
He was also the orderly when Kevin Costner went to go see his wife in the hospital.
Yep.
Yeah.
He played the baseball bat in the famous baseball bat scene.
Exactly.
You're right, Joe. He was everywhere in this movie.
He was actually playing a bird in one of the scenes. I think he was.
I think it was one of the pigeons. He was one of the.
I mean, again, see, that's my question. Like for Brian De Palma, is like, tell me about that shot, because it's. I mean, again, it's laughable and it's funny right now. I mean, maybe the movie's supposed to be almost a comedy, but I don't know. I remember thinking at the time, like, okay, he's throwing him off the roof. He's now kind of, done what, ever he has to do, as Malone advised him. But, it's comical death. And then the end shot with him crashing through the thing and, and then he's in the car, boom. I mean, Jesus Christ. I mean, you almost want to say, Brian De Palma, were you channeling Scooey Mitchell or Alan King during this? I mean, this is a stand-up routine rather than a director.
I think he might have been going for parody at this point, because I don't know. I mean, there are scenes that are, pure De Palma, which is to say they're pure Hitchcock, which is, and it's, when those scenes start, it's become almost like parody at this point, because you start to see it and you see it coming, because De Palma takes that Hitchcock thing of showing you basically where everything is positioned, because he's going to move it around. And it's funny watching now, knowing the Union Station scene, and having seen it, I don't know, 10, 20 times at this point in my life. It's funny watching it get set up, because even if, like, I want to think that even if this was my first time watching this movie, and having seen enough De Palma movies by this point, I would have seen it coming. This is going to be a big De Palma set piece. It's also similar in the opening scene in the bar. He establishes where everyone is sitting, establishes where the little girl is, establishes that there's a guy drinking back there. There's the suitcase. So he does establish all that the way he does, not as meticulously as like maybe
like something like Carlito's Way, where the interaction of where those people are, specifically in context to Pacino as he's going in and out of the subway and up and down the escalators, is a kind of a masterwork of choreography. But here, I mean, my God, he has the mom go,
baby, in slow motion.
It's like you have the guy, come back, you.
I'm wondering if this was actually an intent at making a parody of
you wonder.
It really, it's hard to.
It does today. It feels almost like a parody. I didn't feel that way in the theater at the time. Of course, it was a Chicago audience, and they were all eating it up. Like,
oh yeah, of course.
But I will also say this in defense of the movie. In a sense, the '80s was a decade of a lot of kind of big, excessive films in a lot of ways. I mean, and they all just kind of got into this hyped up, jacked up, those crazy lines and crazy deaths and, action scenes that went on far too long and were nuts to begin with, all that kind of stuff.
Well,
so maybe they were part and parcel.
It's De Palma, so he's known for his extreme, violent parts. He could have been going for a bit of a parody of these characters or over the topness, trying to do a Verhoeven of sorts. His attempt at trying to do maybe Verhoeven, it's hard to say because this is like my third time watching it, and unfortunately I've given it 3 times. Okay, folks, I have given this a try because I know people, and I don't fault anyone who really enjoy it. For me, I think it starts with, this film starts off dark. It starts with a very dark scene, a very serious, like Godfather, Goodfellas type of heavy scene
where a
child is literally killed on camera and there's no real fanfare or music or anything, just the build up. Like you said, it's the De Palma doing Hitchcock, and you're like, oh, this is the type of film we're in for. And then Costner shows up, and I unfortunately and don't get me wrong, like I said, depending on the movie, I like Costner in. In a movie like this, I didn't like him. It's like the smaller, more grounded roles, like in Field of Dreams or in No Way Out or something along that line.
That was the same year as The Untouchables, and it was a much better performance.
He feels like he's more comfortable in here. Here, he's on this bigger scope picture that is obviously intended to be some kind of mega summer film, and it feels like he's just lost in this. He's not sure what to do in this role. I mean, luckily, I'm wondering how much Connery guided him as well, if De Palma wasn't talking to him. And I think, Costner, because this is still, even though he had done a number of features up till now, he was
Silverado.
He had been in Silverado, was probably the biggest one before that, but I bet
he was loose and funny in that.
He got better direction, probably. I think he was still young enough to where he needed a director to direct him, and if they did that, I think he would have given a better performance in this. But
I'm wondering because it was so big around them, Mark, did the actors feel they had to swing a little bit more towards what would you almost just say was like the essence of the character? Okay, Elliot Ness is the Boy Scout, so let's play up his naivete and even have your voice crack on, like, some of the lines, like, I'm not quite mature yet. I'm waiting for my pubic hair to come in. Every other boy in the shower has grown into a man. Or even Sean Connery, who's, my God, he underplayed every line. And when James Bond, and here he's overdoing it, and all that kind of stuff. And then, to your imitation earlier, Ian, of Capone, of De Niro's Capone. I mean, you can imagine Bob Hoskins just sitting there, like, I'm not even going to react to you cutting me on the cheek and maybe taking off my blemish or, skin cancer, whatever it is. But De Niro goes,
Hoskins,
and then he's like, fine. But I mean, it's everybody's just like, okay, I'm playing the bad guy. I got to be big. You got nothing on me, screaming and jacking about at the end when they're changing the juries. It's like De Niro is usually so much more subtle than that. They must have read this as like, it's all going to be big. It's all going to be over the top. Member probably writes, Malone is shot 100 bullets, yet he's got the chest and balls of a bull. He drags himself. He's going to make sure Ness gets that train schedule. So Sean Connery reads and goes, I guess I'm spitting up blood while I talk. Or, everybody else goes, I guess I got to play the broader aspects of my character. I don't know, but it seems like that's the effect.
It does seem like that's the effect. And that's the thing, is that there's parts of it that I like I like the opening. I don't like seeing kids killed, but I'm just saying, for the sake of a story like this, I'm like, that's a hell of a way to open up, especially if you're going from like the TV show that a lot of people knew yet at that time to this. You're like, oh, we're not doing the TV show. But then you get into kind of the TV show stuff. But then you get that wonderful scene with Drago sitting outside Ness's home and just giving that standard kind of gangster indirect warning about,
nice
how
family.
I liked that scene too. That scene had some weight to it. I'm like, okay, I even like Costner in that scene. I'm like, okay, give me some of that. And then we go into 4 guys are walking into the mail room with shotguns, and they just take out this entire, this entire moonshine operation with just these 4 guys. And I'm like, what? And then the number of other things that they do. He's posting up his headlines from the newspaper. He's keeping his scrapbook, and you have the gimmick of the accountant always coming in. Hey, we could get him on income tax evasion. Nah.
God. Yeah.
We could get us.
When they mentioned the income tax thing once, but then by the 5th or 6th reference, I'm like, In
Gee, I
case you
wonder how
weren't
they
paying
get
attention.
Capone.
Right.
Yeah, how did Capone get busted? What? It just
generally too. I'm sorry, go ahead, Mark.
No, I just saying it for the tone wise. I think one of the things that just throws me off is like, pick a lane, please, De Palma. If you're gonna go, the one hand, fine, but it felt like trying to jump between the two, and I'm just like, I couldn't get into
De Palma knows better too, because generally when you're making a movie, unless it's a comedy, you have to sort of pick who's going to be big and who's not going to be big. If you're going to do big visuals and big score, then the acting has to be more centered. If you're going to do a big score and big acting, then the plot at least has to be a little bit more reined in the dialogue. So it isn't everybody going at an 11, like in Spinal Tap. Here, everything's kind of at that 11. I mean, and it's funny because it starts off with, even the credits are having fun. Like, there are these shadows going across the name of the actors. And then it's like, are they in prison? It's kind of like, okay, it's going to be, about getting the bad guys. And that music is but the music is having fun. And that's where I think De Palma could have left it. Because a lot of times in his scores, they are big where a lot of the rest of the stuff isn't as much. Case in point, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Obsession, but Bernard Herrmann did the score, and it's truly grand. Like, it's as big as the cathedral where Cliff Robertson is visiting when he's over in Italy, and everything. Genevieve Bujold's character is restoring the art and stuff, but the script, well, it's kind of grandiose in its way. The performances by all three leads in Obsession, including John Lithgow, who plays the villain, are very understated because something has to give. Something has to take the subtle thing. Here, they're all playing it big, and it looks big, it sounds big, it's acted big, and there needs to be some relief somewhere.
And pulling over, I think we lost our live viewer, Richard. He may not have liked us.
He has an early meeting.
Well, he said it was a skillfully crafted, stylized film. He felt, and he says Brian De Palma is kind of a hit and miss director, and he agreed that it is for enjoyment. And it is. But that's the thing, is it felt like they were trying to have their cake and eat it too. It felt like, we want to do this big summer or whenever it was really, film with all these big ensemble cast. And because I remember the big hype for it, there were trailers for this everywhere. I mean, you saw De Niro more times in the trailer than you do in the movie, because the trailer showed so many times.
Well, and he was a big star at the time too.
Yeah, well, I know, but I mean,
the studio went along with it too.
And then they always did the climactic image of Ness with the wind kicking up his suit as he's got the shotgun, the same shot you would see on the DVD and the VHS cover and the poster and everything, in the trailer. So they built it up to be this like big summer movie, but it also felt like there were these scenes where we want to kind of give you that gangster feel yet, but then we want to do the popcorn film, and that unevenness, I think, throws me off, because I didn't actually mind the scene either where Ness confronts Capone, where he literally walks down the street and goes into the hotel and confronts Capone as he's coming down the stairs. I mean, I actually kind of like that scene because there's a little bit of weight, a little bit of threat for our Untouchables. And come on, let's look at that line.
Yeah, he's got the high road. He's on the high ground, Anakin, there, because he's on the top of the stairs, and Costner's Ness has never looked so small.
And then if I look at the obvious tagline drop by the guy who tries to bribe Elliot Ness, he goes, "What? Are you guys untouchable?" And I'm like, "Oh my fucking god, come on, really?"
Yeah. Well, the other weird thing about that's the encounter on the steps is Capone is like, "You're gonna talk to me like this in front of my son?" I'm like, which one's one of these like 40-year-old men around you is supposed to be?
There's a little kid. Yeah.
De Palma doesn't provide coverage there, but he doesn't provide the coverage.
I didn't see him.
There was a little kid. I thought it was a little person at first carrying his luggage.
He's Little Caesar.
I thought he was a little.
Now listen here, Nash.
I thought
you're gonna walk right
out
of here. See,
I thought Capone had a
keep on walking,
little
see?
person carrying his luggage or something before he said son. Because I looked at that going, wait, is that And he said his son, and I'm like, okay, now we just bring his son into this, and it's just mentioned once, and that's it. It's like I'm like, okay, there's so many toss-off things. Like, I didn't even realize until you get to the scene later. It feels like time jumps are in this as well, because you're sitting there and suddenly it's like, well, how's your wife doing? Oh, she had a girl, a boy, and I'm like,
you look pregnant.
I'm like, when was she pregnant? She didn't.
Well, it's bad. It was bad coverage of Patricia Clarkson, because she is very clearly pregnant, but you can only tell that because, like, in the 2 scenes she has before she's in the hospital, you can kind of tell that her outfit is bowing out a little bit. They don't make a big deal about it. They don't really talk about it. Yeah, it's just very sloppy. And now thinking about the sun angle, I'm thinking, okay, in a real movie, they could have done some kind of a parallel thing where, like, Ness is a father, Capone's a father, but they're on these very different paths, and yet they're these kind of converging trains. What do you do with that? Does it mean anything? Who knows? But just that's the frustrating thing about this is it's not a real movie. I mean, yes, it's got a runtime and actors and sets and everything, but as far as, like, if you told me, like, you're gonna watch a really cool exploration of Prohibition in the 1930s, I'd be mad if that was my first time coming out of it. I want to ask a quick question because I know we're almost at time, but the original poster for this, I think, Mark, you brought this up about holding the guns. Was it? I know Capone's kind of a big figure in the background, but is it Ness and his gang kind of holding up guns, pointing out towards the audience? Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, it's almost like they're on the top of a building or something, because it's kind of a far shot of them. There's different. Some are a little bit closer than the others, but yes.
Ness is pointing his gun at the audience. I've got the poster here. You got Andy Garcia with a shotgun pointed off to the angle. Oh no, the accountant, he's got a
calculator, right?
He's got a shotgun.
Abacus.
There you go. He's got his shotgun off to the side. Andy Garcia's got his shotgun up like he's a hunter, and Sean Connery has a Tommy gun.
I thought he had his killer 4-leaf clover.
And then it's the silhouette of Capone over.
But he's also wearing sunglasses, which he wears in that one scene. So it's like, why are they putting him in sunglasses? Like, this is how sort of misbegotten some of that shoot must have been, because, like, that's the only still shot they got of him is of him wearing the sunglasses, which he wears in one scene and doesn't identify instantly as De Niro or Capone. I mean, I remember thinking that another little weird mistake that, in a host of them.
Is that Union Station behind Charles Martin's scene?
Yeah, I think it is.
Well, the reason I bring up the poster is, and this is sort of apropos of nothing, but I just noticed it was weird. I watched this movie on Paramount Plus the other night, and the kind of the hero image they have is a version of the movie poster, but they Steven Spielberg in E.T'd that poster. They took out the gun. It's no longer Elliot Ness pointing the gun, because that's how I remembered. I was going to look it up, but for some reason my internet is not working right now. I don't know how I still have a connection, because I've been trying to do like little Google searches and it's not coming up. But they replaced the gun with him holding up this cheesy looking, almost cartoon badge.
Wow.
Really?
Awful. Yeah.
Wow.
This is not the Untouchables of my youth.
It's funny, we sometimes talk about, and you guys both with your shows, Ian and Mark, I think do a great service for film fans, including me, who's from that era, before you guys were adults, and I should have perhaps known better on some levels. But in context, films are seen in one way, and a lot of times with the passage of time, they're seen in another way. And sometimes they don't particularly stand the test of time all that well. I think this is one of those movies, that has a lot of memorable scenes that people remember and they laugh at, because, it almost becomes ridiculous because it's become such a part of the vernacular and been parodied on shows and cartoons and The Simpsons and everything else. But when you look at it, you go, why was it done that way? And like I brought up a couple of those possibilities tonight, but I think you both, all three of you, have sort of said it time and time again, if not literally, figuratively. This film could have been a really smart film a la LA Confidential, a la Chinatown, a la a lot of the films in the 30s and 40s. I mean, my God, Angels with Dirty Faces, where Jimmy Cagney decides to cry on the way to the gas chamber, or the electric chair, I guess it was. So, the kids don't emulate him, and they reject him because he went to his death as a chicken. I mean, Jesus, those were some heavy themes in this stuff that had some real guts and impact and seriousness to it. And I start with I start with Mamet and then go to De Palma. It's like, did you want to make this a lampoon of a Western? I mean, it almost feels like it's a Sergio Leone Western, like Good, the Bad, the Ugly. By and large, throughout that is borderline. Is this a Western or a parody of a Western? And it works. It works very well, but it's never overacted. I mean, maybe a little bit by Eli Wallach in places, but he's also the comic relief. Here, everybody's kind of over the top or too big or too arch in some respects, except one or two characters, like maybe the Patricia Clarkson wife is she's kind of reined in, but it's you just I ask questions like, why did they do it this way? Why did they go that route?
I thought about this, and briefly, I'll just say that, one of the big discoveries, as I've mentioned, being on this show and talking about a lot of these old films that I just, when I was younger, I thought, oh, these 1930s and 40s gangster pictures are so cheesy and just like kind of funny and hokey. They're not. Right. A lot of them are deadly serious. Even The Little Giant, which was a comedy, had its heavier moments and took the characters seriously. In the context that they weren't making fun of them. They were kind of making fun of, they were lampooning societal issues at the time very smartly. The Untouchables feels almost like it was made by people who didn't take those movies seriously, but wanted to make what they thought one of those movies was. And it just doesn't work. Go ahead, Joe.
I wonder if, we've established De Palma was a Leone fan. He's an Argento fan, so he loves the old spaghetti westerns. He loves the giallo. I'm wondering if this was his attempt at making like one of those Franco Nero, Maurizio Merli Italian cop movies, where it's just a badass cop who just runs down the street beating the shit out of the bad guys. And I don't know.
The 80s was that decade for a lot of people, going that same route with everything being a little too big.
This was just an odd choice for 87, because I pulled up the films of 87, and man, what a year. This is why I love the 80s. People call the 80s almost like a golden age of a second resurgence of Hollywood, not quite golden age, but so many films. But if you look at the other films, this is an odd film to release that year, because your other like heavily violent films or a little bit more to the edge, you've got at least 2 Vietnam films in here with, I think, Hamburger Hill and Gardens of Stone. You've got in here. You've got Full Metal Jacket that came out this same year, and I think a Hamburger Hill as well. But I mean, then you've got we had Wall Street, which we've talked about. You had Fatal Attraction come out. You had Lethal Weapon come out.
Yeah. Moonstruck, a lot of good romantic comedies. Moonstruck, Broadcast News were that year.
Yeah, you had Less Than Zero that year. So as far as dramas go, you had some pretty heavy drama films and some decent comedies. So to have this film come out this year is it sticks out from the comedy and genre films like you had for the horror, like Lost Boys and
even a movie like Fatal Attraction, which is pulp, right? It's very underplayed and it's very sly in its way. I mean, there's the direction and sort of the tenor of it. It's a slow burn, a slow build in a lot of respects. And outside of the last maybe 20 minutes, even Glenn Close's character doesn't become, kind of the gonzo crazy woman, with the knife in the shower and the bath running water and all that shit. But this one, to compare to that list of movies that I think were a little more, dare I say, sophisticated as a general term, this one seems more not sophisticated.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, like if you were to say we're going to have a marathon of movies from 1987, and you talk about how each of those films minus the comedies, although you could make a case that the comedies at least took their subject matter seriously in the process of making comedy. But the dramas, Wall Street, Less Than Zero, which is kind of a flawed adaptation of the Bret Easton Ellis novel. Let's just say we'll put those three films. You start off Less Than Zero, then you go to Wall Street, and you got someone hooked, like, oh my God, now I'm going to watch a movie about 1930s Prohibition starring, Kevin Costner, Sean Connery, and Robert De Niro. I cannot wait. And then they get this movie, and like, wait, I thought you were showing me, serious movies. And by all rights, it should have been.
And even No Way Out was pulp. No Way Out is a pulpy story, but it's very slyly done. I mean, you've got George Zunza and Gene Hackman, and even Will Patton, who gets to be a little bit crazy in it, is underplaying. He talks through his lower teeth the entire film because he knows if he goes like this, he's playing on top of the already big role,
Well, and this is the year also of RoboCop and Running Man came out this year as well. So you've got your extreme violence, your more playful extreme violence there, and then you have De Niro in another film that he was far better in Angel Heart, which disturbed the frack out of me when I was a kid, because I was probably way too young at 11 or 12 years old to be watching Angel Heart, but it was on cable and I watched Angel Heart. And that movie, is heavy and dark. And it's just really interesting seeing the other wide release films that came out during this time to have this film released then. It was like, what were you thinking? Because there was, as far as, because we know about Hollywood too, and we look at trends and you look at types of films that are usually released within a year, while they may be different in story in that thematic, the bigger films, the ones that are more popular, they kind of fit similar type of, okay, they went kind of with this tone or whatever. And in this one, you're like, yeah, here's a period piece. There were really, outside of the Vietnam films, no real other period pieces going on at this.
This thing skated by on pedigree, I think, and that's about it.
Well, I will say this, as big a hit as it was, and I think, like Time Magazine famously said, this is bullshit, but it's glossy bullshit, and there was a lot of glossy bullshit in movies in that era. And they were one of the kinder reviews because it wasn't very well reviewed. It didn't get a lot of Oscar nominations. I think it got score and sound and costumes and Connery. It didn't get a Best Picture or screenplay or any other acting nominations. And I think even in its time, as much as I enjoyed it as a young man, seeing it and thinking it was this kind of modern, well, not modern, but a riff on Western, it hasn't stood that test of time. Because I think there's just such a lack of subtlety in every corner of it.
I think that's it. I think that's the root of it. We're used to some film, the films like this, like dealing with gangsters and that. Not all of them, but there's some subtlety. You'd get to heavier scenes, don't get me wrong, but there's also some subtlety, or the conversation, the tension builds into the conversation with the guy who knows he's going to die, with the big boss who's going to have him bumped off, but not right now, just at some point. But they're just talking, but the audience knows what's going to happen, but it's not really in your face. And I think Untouchables is just in your face going, look at the good guys and look who we got for it, and look who the bad guy is. Huh?
And that's why I think this might have been De Palma's take on Italian, the Franco Nero movies. I think that might be what he was doing. And it didn't dawn on me until talking to you guys, because this isn't a serious movie, but I don't think it was ever meant to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think by turning it into such a misrepresentation of the actual history, I think David Mamet was interested in creating maybe almost a parody of Westerns, the way Good and the Bad, the Ugly is in many respects.
So, go ahead, Ian.
I was just say I gotta just sleep soon.
No, we're gonna wrap it up.
I'll wrap up with this thought, because Ian brought up The Little Giant. Had the events of this movie taken place like 6 months later, Capone would have just been out of business, like Edward G. Robinson and The Little Giant, and none of this would have had to happen. All these lives could have been saved. There would have been no bloodshed.
Again, done in by bookkeeping.
Done in by bookkeeping. Yeah,
again. Gone out
if
west.
He just wait 6 minutes.
High society.
He'll have to sell off all his merchandise for really cut rate prices.
So there you have it, folks.
Last them out.
The Untouchables. If you really dig it, like our viewer tonight, Richard, you awesome.
Like me.
I'm glad. And
was
Jeff,
his last comment, "Fuck you guys."
No. He said it's for enjoyment, and then I lost all any live viewers. So I like. But no, I mean, I know that
he did not like the way.
I used to always tune this in, Mark, and enjoy laughing at it. And I brought up memories of everybody in the theater wooting and hollering. And now this show is going to forever be in my mind. It's like, yeah, they kind of showed me that.
I didn't want to ruin it for you. No, if you enjoy it, you enjoy it. It's just, I gave it.
On one level, I do, but critical level, not so much.
My final thought is, I think it's partly everything we said tonight, and for me a lot. Costner's really hard sell for me. He always has been. I don't know why. It's just the smaller films, and I say smaller, I mean smaller story type films. I think I enjoy him a lot more in than when it got to the bigger films like The Postman and Waterworld. and you know,
when Costner's like attempting to be a tough guy, he loses me because he doesn't have that aura. Like Stallone can do it, Schwarzenegger can do it, De Niro can do it, Pacino can do it. Costner can't.
He's not a tough guy. And yeah. So that's it for me. I this is my third time watching it. I probably won't watch it again either for a very long time. Maybe if someone else wants to watch, but I've got so much other things to watch. But your just final thought with Untouchables, Jeff. Go ahead. Let's go with a positive here.
I do like the score a lot, and the clothes look amazing, and a lot of it, if you're in the right mindset, is a hoot and a half. Although doing this show makes me want to watch LA Confidential again. Thank you, Ian.
There you go.
A far superior film.
For sure. Ian, your final thought with The Untouchables.
My final thought is watch LA Confidential.
There you go. Joe, what about you, sir?
Definitely watch LA Confidential because it's a great movie and a better movie than this. But I still love it. I'm not going to. I don't think it's going to be one of those things where I'm never going to watch it again. It'll probably still be in my rotation somewhere. It'll be one of those things where if it pops on TV and I'm flipping channels, which I never do anymore anyway. I don't know why I even say this, but I'll check it out. Or if somebody wants to watch it, I'll throw it on. I never, like I said at the beginning, I never thought it was anything like on the level of like The Godfather or anything like that. There's like a sub level, and I think this is like next to the Scarface remake in that regard. But overall, I've always liked it. I still do after today, even if the panel here mostly. Well, I guess like it's split down the middle with Jeff and I on one side, Ian and Mark on the other.
And yet, like Pauline Kael, as I've said, I see the criticism of this. Even when I liked it more than, I know Ian can't watch this anymore. I could still watch it if I stumbled across it. Would probably enjoy it. And
I still enjoyed it today, but
good criticisms.
But it's got its warts,
It has its warts, and I think what we've covered tonight is exactly how a lot of people feel about this film. There's some people that love it, some that are like, yeah, and some people that go, yeah, I'm not watching that again. It's watchable. I'm not going to say it's not watchable. I'm just going to say that if you're looking for something solid gangstery to watch, look at the other films we've looked at this month so far. And if you really are, I'm going to plug it. Watch the Penguin pilot, because
I'm waiting for November for
very good. Very well done.
I will say, even just not because it's a DC product, just because watching it in general, as far as the streaming shows that have come out lately, I enjoyed this one quite a bit for Colin Farrell, who seems to get lost in this character. And it's gangster themed, which I dig as well. But I think it's worth a watch. And Untouchables is too, with you got a bunch of friends and popcorn and maybe in the background type of movie. So that will do it for tonight. Thank you, my panel. And now I go around with the license to shill to all my panel here, the wonderful folks who are patient with this host. So first we'll start with you, Joe. Go ahead. What do you got to shill?
Well, I'm not going to shill myself this week. My dear longtime friend Adolfo Acosta has released a book. It's available on Amazon. It is called 31 Nights of Halloween, a beginner's movie guide for every night of spooky season. He compiled a bunch of his reviews, and I just learned about it Saturday. I ordered it. My copy hasn't arrived yet, but it's available on Amazon. And Adolfo and I have been friends for over 10 years. Just wanted to plug his book, and it's the first time he's done anything like this. So
Sweet.
Good luck to him.
Very cool. Very cool.
Very nice.
And Ian?
I'll plug Adolfo's book too. I haven't read it, but I just wrote it down based on Joe's recommendation. So.
Nice.
But no, I'm Ian Simmons. I run Kicking the Seat, which you can find on kickseat.com and also on YouTube. And do weekly podcasts and interviews and movie reviews and all that good stuff. And otherwise I'm here on Monday nights talking about movies, or in this case, The Untouchables.
Oh, zing. Wow, nice one. Jeff, go ahead, sir.
I write movie reviews and sometimes TV reviews for the establishingshot.org, as you can read. I do some feature articles for the pipelineartist.com website about movies and writing and the arts. And speaking of books, I just did 14 illustrations for a book that comes out in November that you can order through Amazon called The Show Goes On. And it's written by a Broadway expert, and he writes about replacement casts on Broadway, the stories about who replaced the stars and why. And so, I do caricatures. We've talked about that here. I just got done illustrating that book, and it's going to be published soon. So I'm in the publishing world, as we've just been talking.
Wow, you going for that EGOT?
It's actually my 8th book I've illustrated, but everyone's counting.
You're going for that EGOT, aren't you?
Yes, damn it.
What's the author's name? So it's
Ron Fassler, Fassler. And one of the first books I illustrated was a theatrical memoir he wrote about seeing shows in the 70s when he was using his paper route money to go into New York and see them for bargain prices in the cheap seats. And it's called Up in the Cheap Seats. And that I think I did 12 illustrations for. So He's been very good to me. He's a good friend, and he knows everything about, and it's a fascinating, both books are fascinating. This one is so interesting because he tells stories about celebrity feuds and what went behind the out-of-town tryouts and the Patti LuPone versus Glenn Close thing with Sunset Boulevard and some of those kind of things. So it's fascinating read for anybody who loves backstage gossip and what goes into making art.
Fantastic. Great plugs, everyone. And I've got something else to plug. Sawdust City Fright Fest comes to us the second weekend in October, the 11th and 12th, at the Historic Time Community Theater in downtown Oshkosh, Wisconsin. So if you're looking for some indie horror fun, come on down, stay overnight and stay for both Friday and Saturday. We've got 19 shorts and 3 features. 80, I think I did the percentage, 75% of everything we're showing came from Wisconsin. 80% came from the Midwest. So we only have about 4 or 5 films from outside that area, trying to support our Midwest filmmakers and especially Wisconsin. So come for that, again, in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. And I believe it's October 6th. It's available, maybe available for pre-order. There's a film called 9 Windows, and I'm in it. There's sort of. The story is kind of a retelling of The Rear Window with a woman who is confined to a wheelchair who views the world through 9 streaming windows of the internet, and I happen to be one of the panels on it. So
are you Miss Torso?
I'm Miss Torso. Yeah, I'm not the middle square, so I didn't get the middle square. But it's from Lou Simon, a really great, talented filmmaker, and and I was some odd coincidence just happened, and I am a part of it. So So that's coming out in October. And coming out this week will be 2 more interviews. I just interviewed Jason Butler, part of the Butler brothers, who did Purgatory Jack, which is showing at Sawdust City Fright Fest, and A Time to Die director, as well as the star. She's going to be on the show as well. Those 2 will be, I'll be interviewing them tomorrow, and those will drop later this week. That's A Time to Die. That is a Wisconsin-produced horror film. Robert, he shot it in Madison. Actually, Diva of the Spoiler Room, Dawn, makes a short appearance in that as an extra. So I'll be interviewing him and Christina Bryan, who's the star of the movie. So lots of stuff coming up. Enough of me babbling. Thank you so much to my wonderful panel. Thank you to the live viewers. Robert, you in YouTube, thank you so much for watching. And yeah, until next time, we'll just say good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.